All right, so today we're diving into some poetry.
Yep.
Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken and other poems.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, from the reviews and background info you sent over, you're looking for poetry that's accessible and meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Something you can enjoy even if you're not like a poetry expert.
Right.
Plus, you're a busy person, so you want to know if this book is worth your time, you know.
Based on what you're looking for, I'd say this collection is a definite yes.
Okay.
Frost's poems are known for their deceptively simple style.
Okay.
He uses clear language and everyday imagery,
Yeah,
but there are always deeper layers of meaning to uncover.
I see.
Think of it like a perfectly crafted folk song,
Yeah.
catchy on the surface, but with a depth that stays with you.
Okay, that sounds promising, but I have to admit the title poem, The Road Not Taken, is a little intimidating.
Oh, yeah,
It's so famous,
it is.
and I feel like everyone has their own interpretation of it.
Right.
Is it really as profound as people make it out to be?
It is profound, but perhaps not in the way most people think.
Oh,
One of the most fascinating things about this poem is that it's often wildly misinterpreted.
really?
Frost himself said that only 1 in 1,000 people actually understand it correctly.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
So what's the common misconception then, and what did Frost actually mean?
Most people see The Road Not Taken as a celebration of individuality, like choosing the unconventional path.
Right, okay.
But Frost actually intended it as a gentle satire about a friend who was incredibly indecisive.
Oh,
He even called it a mild satire in his letters.
so the poem about taking the road less traveled is actually about not being able to choose a road at all.
Exactly.
That's pretty ironic.
It is.
Yeah.
And it gets even more interesting when you consider the poem's possible real-life inspiration.
Oh, okay.
Frost had a close friend named Edward Thomas who was known for his indecisiveness.
Uh-huh.
Sadly, Thomas might have misinterpreted the poem, taking it as encouragement to enlist in World War I.
Oh, wow.
And he tragically died in the war.
That's heartbreaking,
It is.
and adds a whole new layer of complexity to the poem.
It does.
But if it's not about blazing your own trail, then what is The Road Not Taken really about?
It's about the stories we tell ourselves about our choices,
Okay.
about how we look back and try to create meaning from our past.
Okay.
Remember the lines, "I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence."
Yeah, I remember those lines.
Yeah.
They always seemed a bit mysterious.
Well, Frost is playing with our expectations there.
Okay.
He's suggesting that the speaker is already crafting a narrative about taking the road less traveled, even though he admits the paths were really about the same.
Right.
It's about the human need to believe our choices matter, even if they don't.
That's such a fascinating insight.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if the poem is less about making the right choice and more about how we come to terms with the choices we've made.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that theme of grappling with choices and consequences runs through many of the poems in this collection.
So while The Road Not Taken might be the most famous, there's a lot more to discover in this book.
Absolutely.
Like what?
Well, Fire and Ice is another incredibly powerful, albeit short poem.
Okay.
It reflects on the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually inspired by Dante's Inferno.
Oh, wow.
It gets right to the heart of human self-destruction using simple but striking imagery.
Short and powerful.
Oh.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
What else?
And then there's The Death of the Hired Man.
Okay.
It's a longer narrative poem about a poor farmhand seeking shelter at the farm where he once worked.
Okay.
And it raises all these questions about responsibility, compassion, and what it truly means to belong.
That sounds really moving.
It is.
It seems like Frost explores some pretty deep themes
Yeah.
using simple language and relatable settings.
It really does.
Yeah.
He captures those universal human experiences of loss, longing, and the search for meaning in a way that feels both profound and accessible. It's like he's inviting you into a conversation about life's big questions, but over a cup of coffee at the kitchen table.
Okay. This is really making me want to pick up this book.
Could.
But I also saw some negative reviews mentioning less memorable poems.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything I should be aware of?
Every collection has its high and low points.
Sure.
Some reviewers found certain poems less emotionally engaging.
Okay.
And there was criticism of one illustrated edition that only focused on the road not taken.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
They miss an opportunity to visualize some of those other powerful images.
Right.
I'm curious, how does Frost compare to other poets I might enjoy? I read some Mary Oliver,
Okay.
and I loved her focus on nature and finding meaning in everyday moments.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah.
Frost and Oliver share a similar sensibility when it comes to observing nature and finding the profound in the ordinary.
So if I enjoy Oliver's work, I'm likely to connect with Frost as well.
I'd say so, yes.
Okay.
Although Frost sometimes delves into darker, more complex themes.
Interesting.
Think of him as Mary Oliver with a touch of melancholy.
Hmm. I can definitely see myself enjoying that.
Yeah.
But I'm still a bit hesitant to jump into a whole collection.
Sure.
Do you have any recommendations for where to start?
Definitely.
Okay.
The Road Not Taken and Fire and Ice are great starting points as they capture Frost's essence.
Okay.
You can even find them online if you want to get a taste before committing to the whole book.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I also noticed one of the editions you sent is pretty short, under 50 pages.
Yes, it's definitely manageable even for busy readers.
Okay.
You could easily finish it in a couple of sittings.
Right.
It's a good choice if you're looking for a quick but impactful read.
Perfect. You've definitely piqued my interest.
Good.
So overall, would you say this collection is a good fit for someone like me who enjoys accessible yet meaningful poetry and doesn't have a ton of time to devote to reading?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think you'll find a lot to appreciate in Frost's work.
Fantastic. I'm excited to dive in, but before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear more about.
That criticism of the illustrated edition. You
Right.
know, it's a shame they didn't explore the visual potential of other poems.
Yeah.
Imagine A Brook in the City, for instance.
Okay.
It paints such a vivid picture of a natural element being swallowed by urban sprawl.
Yeah.
You could practically see the disappearing brook in a stylized illustration, you know?
You're right. I hadn't thought about it that way. It's like Frost is giving artists a starting point
Yeah.
for visual conversation with his words.
Precisely. And speaking of conversations,
Yeah.
the death of the hired man is structured as one.
Hmm.
It unfolds through a husband and wife discussing the return of a former farmhand seeking shelter.
Huh.
And their contrasting viewpoints on responsibility and compassion create this really compelling tension.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's like listening in on a pivotal moment in their lives,
Yeah.
and it also makes the poem feel more accessible somehow.
Exactly. That conversational style is another hallmark of Frost's accessibility.
I see.
But beneath the surface simplicity, he's tackling some really complex themes.
Okay.
The ethics of charity, the meaning of home, even the way we judge others.
Okay, so we've got thought-provoking themes, relatable settings, even a touch of mystery in The Road Not Taken.
Right.
But I have to ask, what about the language itself?
Yeah.
Sometimes poetry can feel too flowery or obscure for my taste.
That's where Frost truly shines.
Okay.
He uses everyday language in such a masterful way.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't try to impress you with fancy vocabulary.
Right.
He aims for clarity and precision.
Okay.
Take a look at these lines from Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening.
Okay.
The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
Wow.
Oh.
It's so simple yet so evocative.
Right.
You can almost feel the stillness of the snowy woods.
Yes.
And the speaker's inner conflict.
Exactly. And that repetition of miles to go before I sleep creates this sense of longing and responsibility. That's another thing to note.
Okay.
Frost's skill with rhythm and rhyme.
Yeah.
He often uses traditional forms,
Right.
but he always infuses them with his own unique voice.
It seems like there's a lot to appreciate in his work, even for someone who's not a poetry scholar.
Absolutely.
You know, I was thinking about The Road Not Taken and its misinterpretations.
Yeah.
Do you think Frost was intentionally trying to mislead his readers?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's impossible to know for sure what was going on in his mind, but
Yeah.
I think he enjoyed playing with ambiguity. You know, he wanted to create poems that could be read on multiple levels.
I see.
It's almost like he's inviting us to question our own assumptions and interpretations.
That's definitely more engaging than just being told what to think.
Exactly.
I like the idea that poetry can be open to different perspectives.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what makes Frost so enduring.
Mm-hmm.
His poems have this timeless quality because they speak to universal human experiences.
Right.
Doubt, choice, the passage of time.
Right.
They spark these internal conversations that resonate across generations.
Okay, you've convinced me.
Good.
This collection is going on my reading list.
Great.
But if I'm being honest, poetry can feel a bit intimidating sometimes.
Sure.
Any advice for approaching this collection?
Just start by simply enjoying the language, the imagery, the rhythm.
Okay.
Don't get too bogged down in trying to analyze every line.
All right.
Just let the words wash over you and see what emotions or thoughts they evoke.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, poetry is meant to be experienced as much as understood.
That's really helpful. I tend to overthink things, so I appreciate that reminder.
Yeah.
So to sum it up, this collection is a good fit for someone who appreciates accessible yet meaningful writing,
Mm-hmm.
enjoys pondering life's big questions, and admires skillful use of language, right?
You nailed it.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of Frost's style and what this collection has to offer. But before we wrap up, what's one key takeaway you hope listeners will get from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Robert Frost, despite his reputation, is a poet for everyone you know.
Right.
You don't need a degree in literature to appreciate his work.
Yeah?
He speaks to the human condition in a way that transcends time and place.
I love that. And I think you've definitely proven that today.
Oh, good.
You've shown how he blends simplicity and depth, tackling these universal themes
Mhm.
in a way that feels both profound and relatable.
Exactly. And if there's one thing I hope listeners will take away, it's to approach his poems with an open mind and a willingness to let the words speak for themselves. You might be surprised by what you discover.
That's great advice, and it perfectly ties back to our discussion about the road not taken and how it's often misinterpreted.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that poetry, like life, isn't always about finding the right answer,
Right.
but about embracing the journey and the different perspectives along the way.
Beautifully said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree. So to all our listeners out there, if you're looking for poetry that speaks to the heart and mind, I highly recommend giving Robert Frost a try. You might just find yourself taking a journey you never expected.
I hope so.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, happy reading.